everyone. My name is Erika Larkins. I'm a professor of anthropology and the director of the Boehner-Stiefel Center for Brazilian Studies. My research focuses on human rights and state violence in Brazil. And buckle your seatbelts because I plan to do try to do way too much in 10 minutes. I know I'm trying to do too much. I even have too many slides, but I'm going to do my best. The talk that I'm going to give is based on an article that I published with a colleague who's at the University of Sao Paulo, Ada Hezia, and the title is Thermal Violence, the Politics of Climate Control in Brazil's Prisons. So I'm going to start by telling you a story. And this is a story that is about the aftermath of a prison break. The prison break happened in this prison complex in Rio. It's the largest in the state. It has a population, an inmate population of 24,500 people. So this is enormous. This is a city within a city. One night in the middle of Rio de Janeiro's very hot summer, some inmates, 3 inmates, made a deal with some guards to escape out the front door. The next morning, when this was discovered, the warden, who had to answer for this happening, decided to mete out some collective punishment. He went to which was intended really to put the blame back on the population and not on the guards. So he went to the wing where those prisoners had been held. He took everybody outside. He marched them out into the yard. You can kind of see these big yards here. And people later said that it was 105 degrees that day. And the prison is located in the hottest part of the city. So if it's 105, it's really like a real feel of 115, 120, who knows what. He told everybody to strip naked. He made them all lay down on the asphalt. And he kept them there for the entire day. The sun moved across the sky. You can imagine the sunburn. And lots of people had heat stroke. There was no water or shade provided. After this, a number of these men's lawyers tried to file complaints, both about the health impacts suffered and also just about, in response to the cruelty of leaving people out in the sun like this. And the warden had a response for that. He said that the sunburns were naturally occurring. This is a quote, "Only God can control the temperature. Who am I to say how hot it was that day?" So I tell you this story because it's an illustrative example of what my colleague and I are calling thermal violence. Thermal violence is the manipulation of environmental and infrastructural conditions, heat, cold, humidity, airflow, to inflict harm on people. It's the harnessing of climate to cause suffering. And as much as the example that I told you sounds kind of spectacular, it's really not. We heard reports like this all the time about the weaponization of heat. So we wanted to find out more after we heard, this is a story that started the research project because we were like, that's crazy, we need to know more. We posed this question, is thermal violence part of everyday life in prison settings? And is temperature being weaponized, and how? Before I explain the methodology and the results, I just want to say a few things about the Brazilian prison system. I'm guessing nobody knows these things, so I want to give you some backgrounds. Brazil has the 3rd largest prison population in the world. It's just, there's just a little under 1 million people that are incarcerated in the country. 70% are Black. It's a very young population. The average age is 28. Low income. Low levels of schooling, as you can see, 70% elementary, 92% have not finished high school, and almost all of them are men. I say this also to remind everyone that a prison population reflects larger societal inequalities, so it should not surprise us that these are the people that we find inside of the prison system. Methodologically, my research collaborator and I conducted dozens of interviews with formerly incarcerated people who experienced incarceration across a wide range of institutions, so jails, state prisons, juvenile facilities, and federal supermax prisons. Most of our interviews came from the states of Alagoas and Pernambuco in the Brazilian Northeast, where my collaborator is based, and from Rio, where my research has largely been focused. In addition to these interviews, we also analyzed thousands of pages of reports that came from watchdog organizations that had been inside of these institutions, attempting to exercise some kind of oversight. The reports don't ever mention temperature explicitly, which is really interesting, but they do mention adjacent things like airflow, water, humidity, et cetera. So they were really useful to us in better understanding how thermal violence was working. Our overall finding was that intentional exposure or the failure to mitigate exposure to environmental extremes is a daily part of humiliation and harm that incarcerated individuals suffer on a regular basis. And we broke it down sort of along two different axes. So there's an active versus passive uses of thermal violence. Active uses are the kinds of things that I described to you, like putting people out to fry like eggs on the sidewalk, right? We also heard lots and lots of stories of people being put in solitary confinement and heat waves as a form of punishment. But what was almost more overwhelmingly remarked upon were these more passive things. And I'm not even sure passive is the right word, but in 10 minutes we're going to use it, right? Because I don't want to get into to make it too complex. But the passive thermal violence is the result of a series of choices about construction, infrastructure, and the administration of the prison. And this really starts with the very first thing, location, location, location. You can imagine that prisons are generally built on unwanted real estate. Nobody is going to give up desirable, cool, lovely cross-breeze real estate to build a prison. The case of the Rio place that I described at the beginning, that's a heat island. It is well known to be the hottest part in the city. Prisons are often built next to polluted waterways, next to landfills or dumps. And when they're built, there tends to be this kind of clearing that happens, right? And this is often done in the name of security, right? You don't want a prison that has trees right up against it. At the same time, this does not allow for sort of natural mitigation of climate. Where is the trees? Where is the cooling, right? And so from the get-go, there are places that have an awful lot of concrete that are going to be really conducive to heat. Building materials. Prisons are built with extremely cheap heat-conductive materials. There's probably people that know more about that in engineering than I do, but they're generally prefab. They have metal roofs. The materials themselves are extremely hot. They trap heat during the day and tend to hold it. The prisons are places that have very, very little ventilation. So in many facilities, the cell doors are metal and they have only this very small porthole. People told us that it was so hot in the summer that they would run to like this, I mean, you can't really run in the cell, but they would go up to this and try to breathe, like trying to get some air from outside of the cell that could possibly be nourishing or cooling. They're not designed to have cross breezes, and they often don't have windows. I'll talk about the fans in a little while, but you can enjoy them for now. My colleague who did a lot of prison visits, she described a similar sensation around the air, that it just feels absolutely suffocating. The further that you go into the building, the farther you are from outside, the more sort of intense the sensation of the still air is. All of these effects are impacted by overcrowding. Brazilian prison system is one of the most overcrowded in the world. It's like 175% capacity. So if there's 800,000 beds, there's 800,000 inmates, there's 400,000 beds. So if it is extremely hot, there is no way that you cannot have your body touching another person's body. People talked to us about how they tried to mitigate the thermal violence by taking turns laying on the concrete floor because it was like a little bit cooler. They would do that in shifts in here, so you can actually see some people doing that. But the overcrowding is a real thing because it amplifies all of the thermal effects that are already in place. Water. Everyone described, I mean, you need water when it's hot, right? We need water to drink, and a common technique for cooling down in a really hot day is to take a shower, right? To dump cold water on yourself. People reported widespread issues around access to water. The tap water that is provided to people, it's tap water. It's not safe to drink in Brazil. It's widely documented to carry parasites. Nonetheless, that's what is being provided, and people are putting it in these little plastic bottles right here. And the reason that they're putting it in the plastic bottles is because the water access is cut all the time. It's cut routinely, so you only have it for a few hours a day, but it's also cut in terms of another strategy for meting out collective punishment. So the water is a situation that's dire and not reliable. I know I'm already running out of time. Remember I said I was going to try to do too much. Cooling technologies, fans, you can get a fan. The prison doesn't provide them, but you can buy one if your family brings money for you, you're allowed to buy a fan. However, the fans are often targeted as an item to confiscate. And then you can buy them back from the commissary, which is really dysfunctional, but that's what happens. They confiscate them, they sell them back to you at the commissary for a marked up price. It's really revealing the places in the prisons that are cooled. So administrative areas, guard break rooms, and interestingly, worship spaces. One inmate told us that he converted just to be able to sit under what he called the blessed air conditioning for a few hours a week. And it was, I mean, he was obviously joking, but it was, there's really no joke in terms of how hot it is. Cold is an issue, but I don't have time to talk about that, so I'm not going to talk about that. In conclusion, I just want to say that these kinds of dynamics we see in the prison are really, they feel really extreme, but they're outside the prison walls too. Low-income communities suffer from the same issues around water access, poor infrastructure, and are often heat islands. So the prison's a place where we can see it in this really stark relief, but it's playing out in the world in all kinds of other contexts. One good thing that happened in the conclusion after this is that when we wrote the article, we sent it out like an executive summary to all kinds of human rights organizations, and it was adopted. The framework that we developed around thermal violence was adopted by the Federal Public Defender's Office. So they put out a note recommending that people, both prison authorities and administrators and lawyers, be conscious of the rise in thermal violence, especially with climate change. So, thank you. And I'm happy to answer questions because I know that was too much, sorry. Anybody?
I can ask a question. So, go please.
No, I was, yeah.
Please go ahead. That's good.
Okay, I'm interested in the cold.
The cold.
I knew more about the cold as a technique for punishing people during the dictatorship.
Yeah. People don't think about cold in Brazil like you think it's already hot, but in southern Brazil it's really cold, and that was something that people complained about a lot because it's not only, it's the failure to, it's the inability to be able to control your body or your climate at all. So in the South, people talked about how they had it was like a concrete bed with a sheet, and it was freezing. And one man told us that he felt like the cells were intentionally designed in the colder areas to let rain in. He said there was only one corner of his cell that didn't get wet. And then he's like, well, at least it was solitary, so I had it all to myself. But the cold is a real serious thing, and we heard lots of stories around strategies like taking one's extra pair of socks and ripping them up into little tiny pieces and putting them between one's fingers and then putting another t-shirt on top of it to try to make gloves in the winter, but the cold is also a real thing. It's generally about trying to exploit people's lack of ability to control the temperature so it kind of goes on both sides of the temperature spectrum.
The inmates will probably prefer solitary than this meat packer, right?
No, they don't. Sometimes, no, it's just different problems. In the solitary, you don't have anyone to help you cope with the conditions, because a lot of it was collaborative. People would talk about sharing water, about, there was a lot of things that were collaborative. At the same time, then there's no, if you're freezing, there's nobody. It's just your body getting hit by the wind and cold, Yeah.
This is a more personal question. What gives you hope and positive energy as we see it carrying this type of research, which is heavy?
That's always a hard one. I think I felt really heartened that, because, in the social sciences, we write things, and it's so much harder to get anyone to listen to us, just to be, people don't, there's not as much value placed on their work that we do. And when I didn't even know about the Nota Técnica, that the government had somebody in the government had read our piece and adopted this framework, I felt so happy in the sense that at least some of the things that we've been saying about human rights abuses and conditions were getting noticed and taken up. I think what gives me hope too is that people are just incredibly resilient. I think that's, I mean, I'm always just like blown away by that. I mean, I look at these pictures and I think like, could I do that? You know, and you hear these stories of people taking care of each other, and I find that pretty hopeful, even in a pretty desperate sort of a situation, so.
I think it is amazing, the range of horrible, cruel methods of torturing people in general. But my question is, what are some possible points of pressure? I mean, the media, or maybe international organizations, or anything like that that could, you know, make some change.
I think the problem is that, I mean, Brazilian prisons are widely known and well documented to be horrible places full of terrible human rights abuses. This is like a no surprise. And part of the challenge is that great proportions of society think that people deserve this. And so that's where we have to really work in terms of a pressure point, is around changing the way that we think about people that are living in a condition of incarceration, because, you know, the reason this is possible is because of sort of radical dehumanization. And again, I would say, like, you know, we're coming into summer here. Every summer there is a huge debate that happens about prisons in the United States and air conditioning. You know, the state of Texas does not have air conditioning in many of its prisons. And there's lots of questions that come. So this is not only Brazil. Brazil's more extreme, but this is something that we find in lots of other contexts as well. And I think that the pressure point is about changing. I mean, we all allow, I mean, I'm not saying, you know, but people allow this. This is socially acceptable in a certain way, and why, and thinking about how to change the social acceptability of doing this to other human beings, I think is the real work that I don't know how to do that. Yeah.
I was wondering, another pressure point is maybe the economic argument, as opposed to the moral one, which is more need means more fights, more sexual violence, which is expensive, and you need more people to cover that. So could there be, because thermal violence might lead to actual violence, which then has compounding effects. So.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to think about, you know, if there is an economic argument to be made there. I think when people largely consider prisons as places to just let people, they don't care about, they don't care in this context if people die or if people kill each other. Sorry to sound so awful, but it's not really a problem for them, because this is a context that's about letting die. Right? And so, I mean, yeah, that sounds really harsh. I'm sorry. Were you going to have something? Yeah.
Oh, yes. I was just going to say, have there been like any efforts to create like documentaries or like to bring more awareness to this? Like, I know like one of like the reasons people know like a lot about the El Salvador prisons is because of like the documentaries and how much like social media has brought it to light. And like there's like this documentary, it's called like The 13. It's on YouTube. It's like a very opening documentary that talks about like United States prison systems. So has like there been any resources to like do that in Brazil? Like,
yeah, that's such a good question. You know, it's so hard to get access to do any of this, right? And so, and you know, prisons are governed by lots of power structures, and all those power structures have to want to have a camera, let's just say. So to find a confluence of power structures, both the state and the guards that would want to show stuff like this to everybody, and from the internal sort of prison power structures of gangs or whatever that largely administer lots of the everyday life, I mean, not the air conditioning, but the other stuff, it would be hard, it's hard to find moments where everybody thinks it'd be a great idea to reveal whatever is going on. So the images are all coming from reports, and they're terrible quality. Like, you're like looking at it with like a microscope, and you can't, you know, it's so but yes, it would be amazing if there could be. But I don't know if people, I mean, I think it goes back to that same question, like, do we really not know? Or do we kind of know, but we don't really want to think about it, or, you know? And so there's like so much there's only so much that's about education, and then the rest of it has to be about what kinds of action or what people are willing to tolerate and the actions they'll take against it, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, you guys.